Still preparing. Oh, I forgot about this. Shit. Runners, stress fractures, and food intake.
See, I'm glad you're doing this.
A little nervous because I forgot that the last time I did it, I think it was messed up. Okay. Says it's setting it up now. I always forget, and I'm like a minute behind. 2 minutes, whatever.
I think we're on.
All right, we are. Awesome. Okay. So, hi everybody. I'm so super excited about this group and the response that we've gotten over the past few days even. If you're new, put out an intro. I'll send out like a welcome to the new members tomorrow too. But I'm Stephanie Mundt, physical therapist and running coach.
And I'm Abby Peachey. I'm also a physical therapist and a running coach.
And so Abby and I just wanted to come on tonight and talk about running, stress fractures, and food intake. And we're hoping that just sharing our stories helps others kind of recognize if that's an issue for them, and also just helps you get the help you need if you're kind of in this injury cycle and know a few things about just that connection and what we've experienced. And Abby and I have chatted, and we've had similar types of injury with the stress fractures, but different kind of mechanisms to get there. So we wanted to just kind of share about the differences between our experiences really, and hope that it helps some women out there. So I'm gonna start. Mine's probably more of the classic what people think of when they think of energy deficiency and low food intake leading to injury. So I was anorexic, or orthorexic was one of the terms they used in high school going into college. My first stress fracture was in high school, and I had 2 that year, and then several over that. I kind of lost track, but I just recently had my 11th stress fracture. And I was diagnosed with osteoporosis when I was 20. And then when I was 22, actually went back to osteopenia, and now my bone density is pretty normal. So the process was that I basically restricted my eating, over-exercised to try to run faster, and that led to low bone density and my first stress fracture. So didn't have enough energy availability to even have a period. When I got to college, they put me on oral birth control to start a period, and I think the goal with that was also to help me gain weight. But it didn't help. I didn't, actually address the underlying issue. Even though I was having a period, I still wasn't, my body wasn't at the point where it was healthy enough to basically tolerate the loads that I was putting on it with running and rebuild bone. So throughout, this whole, I guess now it's been, gosh, did I graduate from high school? Or from high school is 2008, so 12 years ago. So weird. I've been battling this low bone density and recurrent stress injuries, and throughout that time, I think my energy availability has gone up and down as well, because of faulty beliefs in how many calories I need to get and what I should be eating. So I think the big points from my story are coming back to one, if you have disordered eating and you have food fears, and you're restricting for any reason, and it's become something that's really taken over, you should really seek help from a registered dietitian, a counselor, a doctor as well. Just get a full team around you, because that can really negatively impact your health in the long run. I have a thyroid issue as well now, and I think that might be related, and can also, the hormones and the balance there might also affect it. But that I think is the first point. And then the second one is, as Abby and I were talking about earlier as well, and she'll touch on this too, with my most recent stress fracture. First, the first X-ray I got was the wrong view, most likely. So if you're having a certain issue that needs attention and you get imaging done and it's negative, you may want to seek a second opinion. X-rays typically won't show stress fractures for 4 to 6 weeks anyway, so that could also give you a false sense of what's going on. But even MRIs, and Abby had a similar experience and she'll touch on that too, so even MRIs may not actually give you the information that you're looking for. And then just how that lack of energy over time and it can affect even more than bones. I mean, we can see that in injuries in tendons and muscles, but I think bones are probably going to be your biggest hit, and kind of a red flag if you're a physical therapist and seeing a runner with multiple stress fractures. That's something that you want to look into a little bit further. I think that's it. It's really fast, but Abby, what's so I think the differences in our story are really gonna yours might speak to a lot of more people, because it's, I think, less apparent. So what, kind of tell us what's been your experience with food intake, energy, and bone stress injuries.
Yeah, so my story is definitely different than Stephanie's. I did not grow up as a runner. I played basketball, played soccer, did not start running myself until after college. Um, and I ended up getting a bone stress reaction in my tibia, which is my shin bone. And I think an important thing to note is that with bone stress injuries, there is a continuum of types of injuries that can occur. And so on the lower end of the spectrum, you have a stress reaction, and that's where there can be breakdown of the bone, and some inflammation to the area, but you don't actually have a fracture. As we go along that continuum, it can turn into a stress fracture, and then after that, it can turn to a full-blown fracture as well. So for me, I didn't have an actual stress fracture. I had stress reactions. So they were a more mild version of a bone stress injury. Um, and the first one that I got was definitely due to training errors. Like I was doing too much too quick um, between strength training. I was working out with a trainer and then also doing my running on my own. And it just kind of created this perfect storm um, for this to occur. And kind of like Steph's story, when I went into the doctor, the orthopedic did an x-ray, and I knew that that wasn't, the gold standard as far as imaging for bone stress injuries. And so I had requested to get an MRI done, and the MRI actually ended up coming back negative. And after doing some research, I had found that in research studies, up to 40% of bone stress injuries can show a false negative, meaning that nothing shows up on the MRI. And so I ended up trying to continue rehabbing and just knew something was wrong. And so I ended up having to put myself in a boot for a little while and then was able to rehab from there. Didn't really think anything of it after that, just thought, okay, it was probably just me being stupid with my training. And then exactly a year later, the same thing happened in the same bone, same leg. And I looked back and I was like, okay, well, my training loads were really low. I was not running very many miles. I was getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep. I tracked my HRV, which is my heart rate variability, for stress related reasons. And that was like the best it's ever been. And so, stress wise, I was feeling great, getting tons of sleep. But one thing that I was not paying attention to was my nutrition. And that is definitely, I think, the key link to this specific injury here. And it wasn't even so much intentional. And I think that that's an important thing for people to note, is that the majority of times that athletes are in this low energy availability, meaning that they're not taking in enough calories for the amount of physical activity that they're doing in a day, that more often than not, it is unintentional. So it's not someone that is trying to necessarily diet or cut calories per se. So like for myself, I have kind of a crazy schedule where like I'll be working with patients for like hours and hours without a break. And so sometimes I'll go like 6 to 8 hours without eating. And then when I do eat, depending on how busy I would be, like I would just grab a little snack just to like basically tide myself over. And then because of those behaviors with eating, I was not getting enough calories collectively throughout the day to maintain, what I needed to for working out. And one thing that was interesting as I look back is before my very first bone stress injury, my cycles, they were between 45 and 50 days for the 3 cycles right before the injury occurred. And it wasn't something I had thought of at the time. And then after I rehabbed the injury, they went back to the typical 30-day cycle. And then 9 months later, I had 1 month where it was like 45 days, and then it went back to 30 again. And then that following month is when I got the bone stress injury, and the cycle was like 47 days that day that or that month that I got the bone stress injury. So for me, because I was in that low energy availability, my estrogen levels dropped, which meant that I was not getting, I wasn't going to be able to get my period, or for, a longer period of time. And when our estrogen levels drop, it can affect our bone health. And so our bones aren't as strong with that. And couple that with, I had low vitamin D as well. And vitamin D is needed to help kind of absorb the calcium. So even if I was getting enough calcium, I didn't have enough vitamin D in my body to help with that. So, I think kind of the gist that Steph and I both want to make with this is that when we're in this low energy availability as runners, it can look very different. It doesn't have to be this like kind of cookie cutter
right, not like a stick thin runner. That's not necessarily it. You could be at any weight and still either be in a deficit or be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or look, however you do. So
Yeah. And so I think, both Steph and my story are similar in that we both reached out to a sports dietitian with this. We're physical therapists, but we are by no means experts in nutrition. And we both knew that we were going to need assistance with this and knowing how to get our bodies back to being healthy again so that we could continue to run. And I think also it's so common for people to think that they're getting enough calories when they're really not. Mm-hmm. Like for myself, at baseline, I need 2,200 calories a day. And that's before I even take into equation any sort of exercise that I'm doing. So I'll add on additional calories for whatever else I'm burning from my runs or my strength training. And I think that that's a really important thing for people to pay attention to, is even on those days that you're not working out, are you getting enough calories on those days?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge. Sometimes on the days we don't work out, we think that it's not as important to reach a certain number. And I think it can be challenging at first to start to up it, especially as females, because I think there's, and being athletic, like, everyone in this group is, part of the reason, at least, that I like to run, I mean, I like the mental benefits, but the physical benefits too, of course. Like, I want to look good as well, and like feel strong and robust in my body. And I think we're just so pressured, and all of this misinformation out there, and magazines and social media about 1200, 1500 calorie diets, or looking leaner, and looking, and that getting you faster, that eating more like there's a little bit of like or extra calories, there's a little bit of fear there for possible weight gain or looking different. And I don't know if that's just someone with a disordered eating history, or if that applies to a lot of people. I think it's probably the latter. And so, yeah, I completely agree. That was mind blowing, right? Like, at least 2,000 calories for 125, 130
Yeah.
pound female, plus what you're burning, for you to actually have a surplus to feed everything else that your body needs to do. What else have you learned from all this that's changed in as far as your nutrition, like timing wise, something like that?
Yeah, so I think a big mindset shift for me is just that nutrition is fuel for my body. And I think it's so easy to think about foods being like good foods or bad foods, or like healthy foods or not healthy foods. And I think as athletes, I think we need to think about it differently. Are we getting the nutrients that we need to allow us to be able to do the activities that we want to do, especially for the long term? I think for the majority of the people in this group, they run for their health benefits too, and they want to be able to continue doing it as long as possible. um, so I think that it's, for long-term health, it's definitely important for us to be paying attention to the nutrition piece. And with working with a dietitian, just even getting tips on, with my busy schedule, like how can I make sure that I'm adding in snacks, or what are ways that I can start getting more food in sooner. Like, I have 2 days of the week where I don't get home from work until 9 p.m., which is really late. And then by the time I get home, like, the last thing I want to do is cook a meal. And so one thing that's been working really well that the dietitian recommended was to actually pack my dinner too, and to find something that's easy to eat in the car, so that I'm able to get more of those calories in. And then I think for myself also, just planning ahead is huge. So making sure that I have these snacks that are calorie dense, and they're not just something that are these empty carbs that aren't going to keep me fueled for long or keep me full for long. And is it a healthy fat, and is there protein in there to keep me sustained for longer periods of time? And just having those snacks handy, in ways that are easy to just kind of grab and go, to make it easier to make sure that I'm eating when I need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just back to like us both seeking help from a dietitian in this time, for a while I thought, well, I'm not really training that hard yet for anything. Once I get up to this mileage, then I'll see someone, because that's when it becomes important. And that's not necessarily the case. Even if you're running, you're running a mile every day, that's still exercise. Your heart, your body is still doing the same thing as if you were running 30 or 40 miles a week. Sure, the amounts you're going to have to add on are going to be more, and there's going to be probably some other different needs. But I think my point is, don't necessarily wait until you're at a point where you think that, okay, now is the time that I need to address this, because this actually right now is probably the best time, right? A lot of us are at home more. You might be able to focus on nutrition a little bit more and get into new habits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've both touched on how important working with a dietitian has been, for us with this. And I know one thing that we have both said is just how important it is to find like a dietitian who works with athletes, so sports dietitian, who knows what to look for with runners. And I know my experience had been that when I had talked to my primary care doctor about it, he didn't even know what it was. And so I actually had to educate him on what it was and what the treatment needed to be. And so, I think that that's maybe an important note to make, that if you do bring it up to your doctor, there's a good chance that they aren't going to be aware of what this is. And so making sure that you have a team of healthcare providers that is familiar with working with runners, and not only from the dietitian, but also your physical therapist. I know both Steph and I are huge advocates of people going to physical therapy after having a bone stress injury, to help strengthen the bone and hopefully prevent it from occurring again. And I think that there's so many physical therapists who are generalists, and they don't necessarily know about how to work with runners who are going through this. So definitely make sure that you consult a physical therapist that is used to working with runners as you're going through the rehab process.
Definitely. Yeah. Even, if you've got an experienced ortho doc, even they might be like, oh, you're good to go, you can start running. And that's not the best care that you can get. That was my experience, probably why I've had close to, I've had upwards of 10 to 11 stress fractures, because my experience in college was this yo-yo of like, all right, now it's been 6 weeks since your left foot one, go start running again. And then 3 months later, now I have one in the opposite leg. And it was never brought to my attention that, bones should be loaded appropriately. You can't just jump back into running. You might do okay for a little bit, but that's just not the best care for you long term. So I completely agree. Just if you need help finding a physical therapist in your area, reach out to us, and we can help you with that. But I think that's a huge piece that's missing from the rehab from bone stress injuries. And I'm a huge advocate for getting that straight before it becomes a recurring issue. So you need a big team.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is none of us know it all. So by having a team of people who are, experts in their individual area, their specialty, we can collectively, give you the best care possible that way. If you were to give like one takeaway message for people from, about this topic, what would it be for female runners?
One takeaway message. Okay, for female runners, if you are struggling with fatigue, recurrent injuries, bone stress injuries specifically, or stress fractures, seek help from more than just your primary care doc. There's a good chance that it's going to be related to underfueling and overtraining. And I think this is going to be a long point, but once your fueling's on point, then you can tolerate more training, right? I think don't feel like your body's weak because you're fatigued from this training, or your body's just not robust and you can't train as much as you'd like to. There's more than likely, I think, a nutritional component. There could be other, you could get blood work done, and there could be other things going on as well. But I think fueling and food intake are just so relevant in bone injuries. And if you can get that checked off or crossed off the list, you're going to be in way better health and just see even better performance, which is what we all want, right? So you'll see more consistency and better performance. So to sum it up, if you're dealing with recurrent injuries, fatigue, I think those are the big two that I see. I think reaching out to specifically a sports dietitian, as well as a physical therapist, are going to be great.
I completely agree. I mean, I think you summarized that very well. And I think as runners, it can be very easy for us to think of the nutrition as kind of an afterthought. when really it needs to be a really kind of a centerpiece of our training. And without that proper fueling, we're not going to be able to perform the way that we want to, or to be able to continue training long term.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're wondering, if you're in doubt, you probably need more. That's just gonna put that out there. You probably need more, and of protein, carbs. You end up getting fat with a lot of that stuff, but more calories. I think it's just rampant how much female athletes are probably under fueling.
Yeah, and I've seen studies anywhere from 28 to 58% of endurance female athletes that are in this low energy availability. And so, like Steph said, if you're in doubt, you probably are in this low energy state. So just I think it's important for us to all realize how common this actually is, even if it is unintentional, to really just make sure that we're getting enough calories in to be able to keep up with our training loads.
Absolutely. Yeah. And a little teaser, we have an expert in this group on relative energy deficiency. So we'll have her on in a few weeks as well to answer any more questions. I think because we're recording this on Zoom, we can't see any questions or comments. So if you were able to watch it and you got something out of it, can you just type in what you got out of it, or hashtag helpful or something, so that we know that this is helping to help inform our lives going forward. And then if you have any questions, feel free to direct message either of us, or comment if you're comfortable below the video.
Thanks for listening, guys.
We'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.